Right, so it's neck and neck, Gordon.
Okay.
Etch a sketch. Etch a
Oh,
sketch.
older than 50.
You're absolutely right. 60 years old this year.
Really?
Oh,
Oh, I love that. I hate. Oh, I
okay,
love the
one to
Etch a
you. So
Sketch.
it's at 760 yourself.
Yeah.
The Boeing 747.
Oh, now wait a minute.
Yes.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's 51 years old.
You're absolutely right, Gordon. You are. January the
1969.
22nd, 1970. 22nd was the first commercial flight
Ah.
of the Boeing, so it is over 50. So that's another 2 to you. Now, what can I do? Matt Damon. Everybody's favourite spy. Matt Damon. The Martian. 50 or under 50.
I think he's probably over 50.
I can see yourself, Gordon, as a sort of whisky Scottish sort of Matt Damon. Would that be? You're right. You're absolutely right. God, you're 3 to you. What's
Matt
9, 6?
Damon is over 50.
Yeah, born in 1970, but October, so he's just over 50. I've got a couple more, and this is it.
Okay.
I don't think I can serve this back. If you ever, and anybody's listening to us, come to Scotland, you may travel between Glasgow and Edinburgh on what we call the motorway number 8, the M8. Have you ever stopped at the Hart Hill service station?
Only through necessity.
Okay. Yeah, we've had to do that at the Christmas party. Is that over 50 years old or not? The service stations, were they officially opened after or over 50 years ago or under 50 years ago?
I think they were probably under 50 years old, although they look like they were over 80 years old.
Lady Clydesmuir, I'm not too sure who she is, but she opens it in 1971. It's 49 years old, Gordon Dundas. That is an absolute 10-6. You've beat me in the 50s. Would you have got Melania Trump? That was my last one.
Would have got Melania Trump. Yeah, she must be over 50.
She is born in March 70. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
I've got a few for you.
What?
Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie career. Is that over 50 years old or not?
That was the Pumping Iron. I remember that one when he was the world bodybuilding champion. I would say that was under 50 years old.
On February the 5th, 1970, a film called Hercules in New York opened, starring a young Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he's over 50
That's
years
over
old.
50. What am I talking about?
Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. It is Apollo 13, and that did happen because I like my space. Big fan of the international space. That was 1970. So that
was
the
April
over
the
50.
11th.
Yes.
April the 11th.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Very good.
Good movie,
Very
Gordon. Good movie.
The first ever marathon in New York.
Must be under 50. Must be 48 years old.
It was in September the 13th, 1970.
Oh, you're killing me with these ones, Gordon. That's right on the cusp. It's over 50 years, the marathon. My goodness.
No, exactly. And finally, whoa, here's one. The Jackson 5.
Jackson 5 must be over 50. Must be over 50. First album.
Yeah, January 1970.
Get in there. Get in.
Fantastic.
Gordon, I
I
think you
call
take
that
that-
an honourable draw.
I call it. Okay. And why are we talking about 50, by the way, Gordon? Can we just put that out there?
You're older than 50, you know?
Thanks.
Are you?
Well, not.
Well, you don't look it, Gordon.
Thank
but
you
are
very much. Intellectually, I am
Intellectually, you're
about
well.
half that age and half it again.
Intellect.
No, yes, I am over 50, so I'm just over the age of the newly unveiled whiskey, which is a real triumph. I've never done this at Glengoyne. Go on, Gordon, explain what's...
Well, this
amazing
week
story.
we've had a big release, obviously, at Glengoyne. We've released what we call our fine and rare collection. So we, as everybody knows, we repackaged Glengoyne and repositioned it. Didn't really an evolution, not a revolution. Great new, lovely recyclable packaging. A couple of months ago. Now we've added the 25 and the 30, and the pièce de la résistance is the 50-year-old, the oldest Glengoyne ever launched, and I think we're something like there's only about 15 distilleries in the whole of Scotland that's ever launched a 50-year-old whiskey.
That's a great bit
So
of
it
knowledge.
puts
I was
us
wanting to
into-
find that out, Gordon. So 15
I think
years
it's about that. It's around about that area, I think. Our sister distillery Tamdu is one of them. Then you've got obviously a whole lot of others, but we're I think one of the few distilleries that has launched a 50-year-old whiskey. There's really not that many.
And for those of you that know,
Glenlivet.
right, sorry, Gordon, I was talking over you there.
That's all right.
Just for those of you who know your whiskey, could you explain though, with an average angel share of around 2%, 50 times 2 to me is 100. That should be 100% evaporation. So
no, it doesn't work like that, because it only works of the amount that's left. So it's, it's 2%. You would go to 98, and then it's 2% of 98. But it depends on the cask, and it's not as much as 2%. I think that will, that's not linear either. So it will change over years. But there's no doubt what you see with a lot of older whiskies is you see when you get to 50 years old, you get a lot of oxidation happening. The cask flavors start to sort of withdraw in the latter half of that maturation, and you just get an amazing fruity style whiskey. And what I mean by that, particularly at Glengoyne, is that spirit has changed over 50 years. The cask has added flavors over 50 years. The air has changed the whole makeup of the whiskey, and you get this beautiful complexity, this beautiful depth of flavor that you just don't get in whiskies that are younger than that. And that's why, I mean, you think of 50 years old, that's 1970. That is, and there would be whiskies in here that are older than that. So, if you actually look at 50-year-old whiskies, there's very few of them kicking around, and that's why there's always such a limited amount, is because, it's generally one cask or a couple of casks, and the amount you have left is probably well under half. And if it was a small cask to start with, then,
it's rare.
All these things really have a big impact on it.
Very rare. And as Sandy said, when we're up doing the tours in the Speyside Festival, there's I think a 53 or a 54 up there in Tamdhu, and the wood's just taken over, just overpowered the liquid.
Yeah,
inside.
There's many examples of that, and I've tasted 40-year-old whiskies which are just far too woody, far too spicy. So it's not as simple as just leaving a whiskey in a cask for 50 years and hoping that you get a great whiskey at the end of it. That is a very, very sort of very simple way of looking at it. There's way more understanding of how a whiskey would manifest itself after 50 years. You may have an idea after 30 of maybe which direction it's going, but it's an incredible sort of whiskey to release for us. And it's very limited, and we've had a great response to it. And also, interestingly, for those who want to enter, we're actually giving a bottle, not away, we're opening a bottle for you to sample with your friends. So if you go have a look on the Glengoyne website or on the Glengoyne Facebook page, you can sign up in a ballot to win effectively a bottle that will be open for you and your friends to enjoy. And let's hope when that happens, we can do that in a much more sort of normal way.
That's right. What an opportunity that is. I take it you get no samples, Gordon?
No, Katie, my very good friend, the brand manager, has not got me a sample of this yet, but I will. I'm sure I probably will get a little sample. I'll make sure you get a little. I'll make sure you get a socially distanced taste of it.
Yeah. A big long straw. But it's a red letter, Dana. I sadly cut you off. You're giving us a list of some of the distilleries that have done this, but getting to 50, and we're going to talk about new distilleries in the programme, and I wonder about the new distilleries can only dream of reaching this milestone, because it is a milestone.
Oh, there's many that can't, people just don't have whiskies of that age. So if we look at proprietary bottlings, that means whiskies from the distilleries. So famously, Gordon MacPhail released some very old Glenlivets and things a few years ago, 70 odd years old and things like that. But if we look at proprietary bottlings, if we look at whiskies that have probably launched whiskies of that sort of age, we'd be looking at Highland Park, Glenfiddich, Balvenie, Glengrant, Glengoyne now, obviously Macallan, Dalmore. There's not, Tomatin I think has launched one as well. There's really not a stack of distilleries. Bowmore has launched a 50, I think. It has indeed. Yeah. But there's a lot of distilleries that just don't, Feta Cairn as well, just Tamdhu, just don't have that stock. And that's where these whiskies, yes, in a lot of cases they're very expensive, but they are very limited, they're very exclusive, and they're very desirable.
Yeah, Gordon, I spent, before lockdown, as you know, a good few weeks and months in various airports. And the one in Terminal 5 in Heathrow, great fun down there. And when you go in, previously in the airports they have these supercars that people, crowd round to have a look at these supercars. When I was working in Terminal 5 Heathrow, see the Tamdhu 50, the people that knew their whiskey, you could just see them like jaw drop and like, oh my, there's a 50-year-old Speyside Tamdhu there. And that really drew people in.
It's one of it's unbelievable. It's one of those things that you think, 1970, that whiskey's older than me.
Yeah.
That has been in a cask, sitting in a warehouse, maturing, changing, developing over, over a period of over 50 years. Some of these, depending on what these casks are, if they're married, there could be a cask in there that's 55. It could be an average age of actually 55. 50, it depends on, if it's a single cask or not. So, these are really exclusive limited whiskies, and Glenfarclas is another one. So I mean, there's not a lot of distilleries that have that sort of stock. And for us, little old Glengoyne, to reach 50 years old, we are fantastically excited about it, and really it will be really, really popular. And we're very excited about it. And obviously on the sort of back of launching Rosebank 30, which is another hugely iconic sort of distillery, and it really is a fantastic. Couple of weeks for us, so we're very excited.
It really is, and we're going to go from, it's not all just about us, it's not just all about us, it's also about some of the new distilleries. And you've got a wonderful interview with Bruce of Adelphi coming up as well, so you've went from the Sublime to the new boys on the block.
Well, no, absolutely.
I want to say ridiculous, but it's not.
Well, I mean, it's this is the modern day equivalent, and these guys might only been producing whiskey for 5 years, but it's great for us to have these guys producing whiskey and all that sort of thing. For 45 years in the future, they may produce a cask they've filled, they may produce a 50-year-old, and that's very exciting. And you just think how it makes you realise the longevity of whiskey beyond us. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's time travel.
And that's
clear liquid in it. Who's going to be drinking the whiskey of now that's been distilled right now in 50 years' time?
Exactly.
When I'm receiving my drone package from Amazon, who will be drinking the obviously I'll be on these special pills that have kept me going, but we'll be drinking the whiskey it's produced now, Gordon. I love the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Gordon, any really whiskey news out there? Any whiskey news before we
Is
move
there
on
any
to
other news than a Glengoyne 50?
Not much. Well, there is. Maybe you mentioned about the Glengoyne website and about the chance to have win a bottle of that to taste with your friends. But if you also go to the Glengoyne website and you go to online tastings, you might see a sort of hunk of a gentleman talking about the online tastings and the online experiences that you can do. So
yes, there is. We've shared it as well on social media, but it's certainly in the run up to Christmas we're seeing a demand for it. And look, if you want to have a great distillery experience on your sofa, then get involved for sure, and come and have a look at us. In terms of other whiskey news, I think what's quite interesting is that there's a lot of, in the run up to Christmas now, there's a lot of whiskey being bottled, and lots of people that are wanting to try and find something a little bit different across the sort of range. So there's certainly a good opportunity to buy great packs, virtual tastings and things like that. So have a look around, everybody. Obviously we've got our own stuff as well, but there's certainly a load of offers out there as well.
Oh yeah, loads of stuff out there, Gordon. So I'm going to ask you shortly to talk about the new distilleries and all that. I want to get into that, but some of our regular features, Gordon, we cannot let another week go without our A to Z's. We started this up just to try to look at the wider world of Scotch alphabetically. And we've now reached the letter R. Have you got any R's for us while I get the music?
You get the ball rolling.
Right. Okay. How is your rummager, Gordon? Are you okay? Have you been to the doctor?
I got the cream for that.
R for rummager. It's a piece of equipment when the stills were fired directly by maybe a coal fire, or it'd be more coal fire. The flames would lick the bottom of the stills, and the wash, especially in the first distillation, would stick to the bottom. So you had to rummage the liquids around to stop it sticking and burning. So rummaging, Gordon.
A rummager, absolutely. And this is one of obviously very few stills are direct fired these days, but this is one of the things that a lot of people talk about in terms of maybe how modern whiskey is slightly different to historical whiskey, and they reckon that the use of direct firing stills could be a factor in that. There's obviously a whole load of other things that have changed over 30 years, and a lot of it is, there's a lot of debate about it, but certainly, the way stills are heated is certainly a debate in the industry to a certain extent, like how whether you use Oregon pine washbacks or stainless steel. I mean, it gets to a point you're like, it's great whiskey. So.
Yeah, of course it's great. And if you went further back than that, you would say, unless it's made in the hills by a grandfather hiding from the excise with a small pot still, it's not real whiskey. When is that perfect time when whiskey was whiskey? Timeline's a tricky thing, so
exactly. Yeah, Rummager. It's a great name, though, isn't it?
I
did a bit of rummaging in my sock drawer this morning.
It's like a big chainmail, wasn't it? Big chains that used to go round and round. Big metal chains. So, did you get your socks?
I did get my socks. Yeah. Okay. No, I stupidly, and I'm not going to explain, but I put them in the drawer without folding them on each other. I've got one. Rare. What does rare mean? Rare means scarce, potentially. What does it mean in whiskey? Rare, it's an overused word, I think, these days, like a lot of things. Masterpiece is an overused word. Small batch is an overused word in Scotch whiskey, probably. But I think rare, genuinely, if you look at, we've just launched our fine and rare at Glengoyne, so it is definitely fine and it is definitely rare. There is not a lot. We don't have lots and lots of 25 and 30-year-old whiskey, far less 50-year-old whiskey. So rare is a word that's used, and it obviously pertains to probably demand against volume or demand against availability. But rare doesn't always, it's a word that we use, and it's very relevant because, I find that. People forget that whiskey doesn't come out of tap. And so when you get to those older whiskies and you've lost so much volume and there's very few casks, they genuinely are rare.
Yeah, it's amazing. Are we allowed to mention how much it is, Gordon? Because
it's £22,500.
It's a rare amount of people that I know that can afford that. But
I've got a couple.
I know. Listen,
I've got a couple lined up.
Won't it? Is that right?
Oh, it will go. Yeah, it will go. And look, people will talk about the price, and people will talk about those sort of elements of it. But it's not a whiskey for everybody at 150 pounds a bottle, 150 bottles only. Sorry. So that's it's the way life is. It's like we all want a Lamborghini, but I'd have a Volkswagen Golf. That's the way it goes.
Yes. And I could
go. How is your Renault Captur, by the way?
I could go R for Reynolds. That's right.
How is your Renault Captur?
Oh, it's chugging along nicely, Gordon.
Good.
Absolutely.
I'm liking
lovely.
That.
Listen, I've got a great R, and I've been wanting to deploy this for a few weeks because I've been dying to get the A to Z's going, and the R stands for William Robertson, one of the legends of the whiskey industry, a real true legend. He was meant to be a sailor, but by coincidence he ended up working in a blender's place in Glasgow, and he became one of the true pioneers of whiskey blending. He started up, along with some co-founders, Bunnahabhain Distillery in 1883, and his wife Agnes, Gordon, 14 children, 14 kids. And his wife, I just wanted to have a little side note about the wife. She was one of the first ladies to attend Glasgow University in 1884, and sadly she passed in 1886, halfway through the degree, and he was left to bring up the kids, as it were. And in 1887 he co-founded Highland Distillers, who would go on to take control of Tamdhu a year after it opened in 1898. So he's got a connection to our company there. 1891, Glenglassaugh Distillery. A couple of years later, along with Andrew Usher, North British Grain Distillery he's involved in founding as well. Quite an extraordinary guy. And he dies in 1897, and his two sons, Nander and Jim, take over. And during the Great Depression of the mid-1920s and the rise of DCL and the Johnny Walker and Buchanan, they find themselves squeezed in the middle of that decade, and the siblings, because remember there's 14 of them, I think it's about 7 with shares, sold it all out, and they went bankrupt. And that's part of the story I didn't really know. And then the two sons fought tooth and nail and got the Robertson and Baxter company back on the road again. Big booming company in the 1950s, and then they purchased Glengoyne in 1965, put £1 million into it, and made it one of the sort of flagships distilleries. That still
Added
is
a
to this
third
day.
still, did they not?
They added a third still, yes, a second spirit still. So quite an amazing family. And Robertson and Baxter, the third generation of Robertson, that Ethel lady that went to Glasgow University, her granddaughters, 3 of them, were in control in 1965, and they turned the company into a charitable trust called the Robertson Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely, and it
If
still
you know
is
that
today.
one. Which is still there to this day. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
And they turned it into, they renamed the whole company Edrington. Of course, they had Macallan, Highland Park, Cutty Sark, Famous Grouse, and Glengoyne. So that are very important for not just ourselves,
And
but for the
Tamdhu.
whole industry.
Yep,
And Tamdhu.
absolutely,
So
yeah,
they
yeah.
are for William
Very good,
Robertson.
very good, very good. One more, couple more, just to finish on. Refill. A cask that has been used by a particular distillery before, so when you hear of the phrase refill, whether that's sherry, bourbon, hogs, whatever it may be, generally it is a cask that we've used at Glengoyne or Tamdhu or whatever distillery has used it before, so it will deliver a different style of whiskey than a first fill. And finally, run. The run
Yes.
is the spirit collecting part of the distillation. So through the run, you'll firstly go through the heads of that, which is that we don't want the heads, that's bad stuff. Then we collect the spirit run, and then we have the tails. So the run at Glengoyne, for example, very slowly collected because we heat the stills very slowly because we focus on fruitiness. So there's a few R's for everybody.
That's great. And Gordon, just on that one, because I love my flavours, and you can that's where the distilleries can tweak their flavour profile by that cut, just at the
Oh, sure.
intersection of the head and tail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And obviously at the
bit
beginning
faint,
of that spirit run, so at the higher alcohols, it's different as it is to the end. But your run is an average of those alcohols, maybe between 74 and 62 or whatever it is for each distillery. But actually you can go through different parts of that spirit run. You can see how the spirit changes. Then you move into the faints and you get those more off notes, those more sort of unwanted notes that you don't want. So every distillery has their sort of specific spirit run, as it were. And just a bit of information about an old distillery I used to have. Auchentoshan's, I think, is about the smallest in the world, I think, probably, or certainly in Scotland. It only runs from 82.5 to 80.
Right.
Strangely, I think I might have got that wrong. I think that's about right.
I love all these different
but
quirks,
yeah,
though. You know, that's-
triple distilled whiskey, obviously, just down the road from Glengoyne, but a very, very short spirit run of only, very short spirit run.
Great. Nice people as
in
well.
terms of, but they collect a lot of liquid. Very interesting. Anyway,
Gordon, we've got Alex Bruce lined up just now. Do you want to get into the new distilleries now, or do you want to go to the interview? It is unscripted, so it's up to you.
well, I think Alex is let's just talk a little bit about new distilleries, and we were speaking to Preston Van Winkle last time about America, and there's been a huge upsurge of distilleries in America over the last 10-15 years, and now that's coming through to Scotland. And the first one that I sort of remember when I worked in this industry was Kilhoman on Islay, which was started in 15 odd years ago, and it was really a small operation, and it's developed a really strong following due to the quality of the whiskey. Everybody should look at that as a model. Ardnamurchan is a prime example. We're going to hear from Alex about what's happening at Ardnamurchan. They've released their first whiskey. It's been very popular. But there's a lot of other distilleries that have opened, and I just thought it might be an idea just to sort of run through a little bit of some of these new distilleries that have opened, and and what they're sort of things that make them a little bit different. So I mean, if we look at, stay on Islay. Ardnahoe was opened I think it was opened last year, 2019, maybe even the year before. God, time flies by. But overlooks the Paps of Jura, so it's up on the sort of Caila, Bunnahabhain side of Islay. And just, I think it's a classic peated style Islay malt. Why would you not do that? I think it has some worm tub condensers, and it's got a beautiful outlook. And it's the Lang, one of the Lang brothers. So we've got Douglas Lang and we have Hunter Lang. It's the Hunter Lang side of the business that have opened that distillery.
Room for more in Islay, Gordon? I mean, is there room for Ardnamurchan?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think there's a limit to what you. There's it's the 9th. There's 2 more planned. We've also got Port Ellen opening.
Of course.
So that'll be 10, and there's another one I think that's planned, and there was plans for another one, so that could have been 12. But there is a limit to what I think can be had in on Islay. Water supply, all that. Even just access through ferries makes it very expensive. So a few things to think about.
Yeah.
So to go from Islay, let's go to an urban distillery, Holyrood in Edinburgh. It opened in 2019. Bit of Canadian involvement in that, as well as a few other people. Very tall stills. So it's going to create a very unique style of whiskey. So
I've not been.
I've not been either.
No.
Certainly, unfortunately, can't go at the moment. Let's move back to an island, Lag. We heard from Ewan Mitchell about Lag as the peated, peated lowland. Technically, I'm still not 100% sure about that. No, and then there's we've got distilleries in the Borders now. There's the Borders Distillery, which has been open for a little while, producing great whiskey. Well, we don't really know. We've got Brewdog, for example, have opened their own distillery, Lone Wolf, which is going to produce, quite a diverse range, I think, that fits in with their sort of beer credentials. And then you have a new Macallan is a brand new distillery. It's a brand new distillery. It's an old brand, and it very different sort of prospect to what it was before. So there's a whole. I've not even covered.
No, you've not. We mentioned Gordon and McPhail's Cairn distillery as well a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And then Isle of Raasay is another one that I think is very close to releasing its first whiskey, and that's just very close to Skye. Then you have Torabhaig on Skye, which has released its first 3-year-old, I think, this year. So I mean, there's a lot of them. Lindor's Abbey. Lindor's Abbey.
Yes, they're very nice people.
Triple distilled, Clydeside as well. Clydeside Distillery on the Clyde in the centre of Glasgow, producing spirit and a great place to visit as well. So there's a whole stack of them, and it's great to see. And they're continuing. I mean, even I've heard of one recently called Wolfburn, I think it is, or Wolfcraig. Wolfburn is another one. It's the one up north. Wolfcraig which is another new distillery. Wolfcraig is opening in Stirling as well in the coming years. So there's a huge amount, which is ultimately great to see.
Yeah. A great little gallop around the world of new distilleries. So could you just tee up your interviewee, Mr. Alex Bruce? Give us a little background quickly for those that might not know him. He's a big man in the industry.
He is. Alex has been in the. He actually talks about his sort of route to where he is now. So I'm not going to sort of particularly talk too much about that. But I've known Alex for a long time, and Alex is a guy who I think he's quite a softly spoken guy, but he is a brilliant communicator. He's somebody phoning me, by the way.
That's Alex Bruce on the phone saying...
That is Alex Bruce on the phone. Talk me up. And he's done a great job with Ardnamurchan and Adelphi. He's I think he really is his passion for whiskey is great. And he touches on a lot in this, which is things that maybe you don't think about so much, because I sort of ask him about the 5 things you need to make a great distillery and to start a new distillery. And surprisingly to a lot of people, one of the things he says is great people, and you forget that is, of course, really, really important. So let's have a listen to what he's got to say.
Great. Here we go.
So we're now joined on Whisky Unscripted by a good friend of mine, Alex Bruce of Adelphi. How are you, Alex?
Very well, thank you, Gordon, and thank you very much for having me on.
Well, thank you for finding the time to come and to come and bestow your wisdom upon Whisky Unscripted.
Not much wisdom.
Well, I'm not sure. Not sure. I think you've been doing a bit of wizardry recently, but we'll come to that. How's everything been for the last few months? Quite odd, of course, but you've been pretty busy.
Yeah, I mean, it has been an extraordinary year. I think we all had different terms for it, and all I would say is just been incredibly busy. Whether or not we ever considered managing to launch our first whiskey on, it's just been a very busy year, and we've had to adapt, which has been really interesting.
And I think that's probably the case for a lot of people, is the way that the industry's had to adapt, and what we learn and what we can do in the last 8 months. An element of that we will continue to do even when things go back to normal, which I think is really interesting. So, we will come on to you and your new whiskey and all that sort of thing, which is very exciting, and just very, very happy to see it come out.
Thanks.
A little bit just about you, Alex. You've been in whiskey for a while. Is a good way of putting it.
Yep.
Can you just give everybody a bit of a background to you, your history in this wonderful industry that we work in?
Sure. Well, I kind of got the bug at an early age, before it was certainly legal to drink. I remember vividly with my brother, one of my brothers, having this sort of virtual. It's kind of like a shop, I suppose, in one of the farm buildings at home. We used to invite people to basically come in with pretend money and buy empty cartons of whiskies. And the reason we have these amazing empty cartons, and this is in the kind of 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So all those wonderful brands from back then, which are mainly still alive today.
Uh-huh.
But the reason we had these boxes was that my father had a share in a very delicious delicatessen in Edinburgh called Young and Saunders. Sadly, no longer exists, but it was in the West End, pretty much in the building where Oddbins now, I think. I'm not sure if they still have it. Anyway, when that was when that sadly came to an end, he ended up with a lot of stock of random things like tinned jamon from Spain, and a lot of empty whiskey boxes. So we pounced on them, and we had this shop. And it just, at that point in my life, the visual impact of what these brands had created was fascinating. So I had that as a kind of background. And then when I was coming to the end of university, we had to go off and do a placement in a foreign country, and I managed to blag my way into a job with Ardnamurchan Cognac in their marketing department on the Champs-Élysées in Paris.
Oh, tough gig.
There were worse places. Although I do remember that there was no air conditioning in this lovely old building, and it was an absolutely blisteringly hot summer. But that really got me into the kind of marketing of, I suppose, what you describe as luxury products or luxury brands. And I came back to Scotland really wanting to get stuck into the whiskey industry. Sadly, we were still coming out of the last sort of downturn, if you like, and various mentors told me just to get into drinks anyhow I could. And I managed to land a job with Just Rooney and Brooks wine merchants, and became basically a salesman for them up and down the west coast of Scotland, dealing with hotels and restaurants. And they, of course, had a fantastic portfolio of whiskey, which included the newly formed Diageo in about 98, I think.
Yeah.
I got hooked there, and the Adelphi job, so my first dedicated whiskey job, came completely by chance when I tried to when I tried to buy Adelphi whiskies for our shop, and was basically told that Adelphi had changed hands, and would I be interested in taking on the role. So overnight, in 2004, I switched from wine to whiskey.
Fantastic. And you don't look back from it now, do you?
Certainly don't.
Oh, fantastic. And Adelphi has, I mean, in the last 15 years, obviously, known for its sort of independent bottlings and also that very innovative way of that you mixed whiskies together, which you could enlighten us about. I remember some great stories about that, something about Carlisle. Um, but obviously Adelphi developed or has got a great name as an independent bottler. But there was then, of course, you know, building a distillery, which you've done, and that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with many things in life. If you do a decent job or a half decent job, you create a bit of demand. And then, of course, you have to have the supply to follow up on that demand. And it wasn't just us, coming through the early to mid 2000s, demand for single malt as a category, as you know, was flying. And I was simply getting on a plane in the traditional way of a Scotch whisky ambassador and finding that all our whiskey that we could bottle was flying off the shelves. And we couldn't back it up with enough, So I vividly remember a meeting with the board, Adelphi board, up in Ardnamurchan in 2007. And it was kind of, what's next? What can we do? And we came out of the meeting saying, pretty much the only thing to do here is build a distillery so we can actually look after both the quantity and the quality going forward. So that was the sort of early idea hatched. And it took us a few years to actually work out exactly where and also what sort of style and size of distillery we wanted to build, and I suppose could afford to build as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, for those who maybe do not know, Ardnamurchan is the most westerly point on the British mainland. Is that not correct?
It is, and you certainly know that when you get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just sort of round the corner from Mull, if anybody can visualise where we are, and on the mainland. And what's the connection with Adelphi and Ardnamurchan?
Quite simply, it's the same ownership. So when Jamie Walker, who had owned Adelphi as an independent bottler, so he started Adelphi in December 1992, and he took the name from his great grandfather's distillery, which once existed in the Gobles in Glasgow.
Yes.
So he resurrected the name as an independent bottler. He brought the great nose and wit and pen of Charlie McLean into the game, and created this brand of basically bottling the most exceptional single casks that they really enjoyed themselves. Very simple, but a great way to do it.
Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Well, no, he continued doing that until 2003, and then for various family reasons, he had to find a new owner or owners for the business, and he was delighted to find two very keen Scots, both of whom came from the Ardnamurchan area.
Right, that's right.
And so that's the connection. And they took it on lock, stock and barrel, quite literally, although there were only, I think, 2 barrels in the stock at the time. And all they needed was someone to run it for them. And that's kind of where I came in by accident.
So obviously taking that sort of independent bottling, sort of background, like a lot of independent bottlers have done, if you look at, the Lanes on Isla with Ardnaho, being more in the destiny of your own future in terms of having a distillery has been a trend for independent bottlers over the last 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the key thing here is that, going back to what I said about the demand for single malt, most of the new distilleries that have been built in the last, 15 years, going back to Kilhoman, have been designed and built for single malt, basically, rather than the more traditional making of stocks for blending. With that in mind, the distillery doesn't have to be quite as large as it previously might have been. And you can also concentrate 100% on the style that you want as your single malt, quite simply.
Yeah. No, of course, of course, of course. And so when did the first sort of when did Ardnamurchan first start to be sort of when did you start break ground, as it were?
So we broke ground in 2013.
Yep.
I think the first diggers came in. I think the sign went up early that year saying that we were going to build a distillery. And actually, ironically, the local bus driver who took the kids to school every day, Gordon Mackenzie, drove past the field, and it was just this boggy field with a Highland cow in it, and saw this sign go up and went, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And that same guy, Gordon Mackenzie, is now our distillery manager.
Huh?
So, anyway, we broke ground, and in the spring of that year, we finished levelling the site because it was basically peat bog at the front and solid rock at the back, and a lot of water in between. But we finished levelling the site, and were delighted that His Serene Highness Prince Albert was on a tour of Scotland, which is his favourite place to come, and just so happened to be passing and very kindly planted a tree to commemorate the occasion.
Coincidence is good in these situations.
It is good, yeah. But yeah, broke ground then, and we finished building. Well, we opened the distillery in terms of spirit in 2014, in July 2014.
And so, when you produce a distillery, you're sort of in the destiny and completely of what you want, what style you want to produce, from peated, non-peated, the still shapes, etc. All those defining factors. What was your overall? What did you want to produce? What was the style that you would have? What was the style that you were aiming to produce?
So yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there are lots of different sort of parts to that. I mean, firstly, from an Adelphi point of view, we only ever bottle something that we like to drink ourselves. So the taste, it's basically taste led, if you like. Flavour is the most important part. And if I was to throw some of my favourite distilleries in a bucket and blend them together from a similar region, if you like, so coastal Highland, it would include, things like Talisker, Glengoyne, that kind of style, Highland Park. So very traditionally Highland, but also with a nice bit of coastal influence. So bearing that in mind as a flavour, we then pretty much wanted the location to help us get to that. So we built the distillery to allow us to produce a really good spirit. That was the first thing. And we had the amazing assistance of the late great Dr. Jim Swan in terms of designing that. But we were adamant that all the warehousing would be on site, and that warehousing would be as traditional as possible to allow the elements to help the maturation.
Yeah.
So we currently have 4 Dulwich warehouses there. We're about to build another 2. One of the existing ones is a 2-level, and it's just this massive kind of swirling maturation pot of sea salt and humidity, plenty of humidity up there.
Fantastic.
So it's a combination of trying to make the best spirit we possibly could, but also allowing the regional atmosphere to help. And that, in addition to using our water, which comes off, the hill, the same colour as Coca-Cola, and we obviously use that to reduce the alcohol down to 63.5 when we fill the casks. So there is a huge influence from that as well.
Wow, exciting! So and excitingly, in the last 2 months, really, you've released your first batch from the distillery, which was, I think, 16,000 bottles, was it not?
Yes, no, it's been extraordinary because with lockdown, as we mentioned at the beginning of the chat, literally myself and my sales director Connell had just come back. We rushed home from Australia. We were on a sales trip. Chairman rang us and told us to get home on the last flight out. So that was in the middle of March. We got home, we worked out what we needed to do for Adelphi in lockdown, but we also, within a couple of months, had worked out that we still needed to and wanted to release Ardnamurchan, which was planned for September, October. So as soon as the initial lockdown finished, we were locked in the warehouses, sampling for 2 weeks up there.
Tough gig, everyone. Tough gig.
And what was amazing was, the consistency that we found. We knew that we had mature stock by waiting 6.5 years, or well, certainly 6 years at that point. We knew we had the flavour, but we found plenty of consistency going back, beyond what we'd required for the first batch. So that was massive justification for waiting that long.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we selected around, I think, 60 casks, give or take. We made 3 different options in terms of vattings in miniature form. We took them to all and sundry, including our own team and some very well-known noses. And fortunately, everyone agreed that option 1 was the best and was also the truest to what we had designed in terms of scheduling the spirit. So 50-50 peated and unpeated, and around about 65%, 35% ex-bourbon, ex-sherry. So that went into the mix. We reduced to the strength that we felt held it together with the best texture, which was 46.8, and we had amazing feedback, which was more than we could have expected. So much so that we've just literally come back and walked in the door this morning from another 2 days of putting batch two together.
I saw that on Facebook. I was like, love to be involved. But yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Again, the same mix. So we're planning to try and keep consistency.
And obviously, what I loved about it was the fact that it was a whiskey that, from my perspective, it was a whiskey that I finally got a bottle, by the way.
Good.
And love it. I have to say, it's fantastic. Really, really.
Even more delighted to hear you open it.
No, I love it. It's my style of whiskey too. If I'm honest, I really like that style. I mean, I like all whiskies, but and I think you did it the really right way as well, which was to produce a whiskey that was all about the taste, the style, which is, we've spoken about in this interview and how important that is, and from a price point from a lot of people that was clearly set for people to drink it and enjoy it, which was great.
Well, no, it was so important for us, and if anything, well, I mean, you can see from the packaging, from the labels, etc. There's no mention of first or inaugural or whatever. This is just a whiskey that Ardmamurchan has produced, and happens to be the first time we've done it. But it's going to be hopefully the same going forward, or certainly consistency is key. And as we have older stock coming on in the years to come, then the core range will mature accordingly, but the style will remain the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fantastic. Very excited for you on that, and looking forward to batch 2. So the other thing that I know you do a lot of, we do as well at Glengoyne, and we've just, as you may be aware, repackaged Glengoyne and with a sustainable head-on in terms of using locally sourced materials for our packaging, using no plastics, everything is recyclable. And I know Glengoyne is a very sustainable distillery. I know Ardnamurchan is also at the forefront of that, and that was obviously clearly a decision you made back at the beginning, that you wanted that to be a factor in the distillery going forward.
Yeah, look, we looked at the area. It's basically an hour by single track road. I mean, just to show you how fragile the access is at this point in time, the main Corran ferry, which is one of the 2 ways of getting onto the peninsula, is currently off for maintenance. So we cannot get large lorries on. We can just about get barley in under the bridge from the north, but we can't get casks in. So we have to plan ahead every year to ensure that we don't need casks at this point. But just to compound that, the final stretch of road between Salem and the distillery has been closed for 21 days, albeit with access at night, because a tree has fallen and uprooted not only the cliff face but half the road. So there is literally no way in during the daytime, unless you get in before 8 and after 5. So that is what we're dealing with on an ongoing basis, and for that reason, we really wanted to try and get as many of our raw materials as local as possible, and crucially the heat and power. So we're very fortunate that part of our kind of symbiotic relationship with the local estate and farm, they provide us with locally harvested wood chip from renewable forestry. So all our fuel comes in on a tractor and trailer from 2 miles away, and the electricity is provided from hydro from the same river that we take the water from. So everything is within 2 miles basically. And then the byproducts, the lovely draff and pot ale and all those lovely nutritious things that distilleries make, goes back to the same farm, and it fertilizes and feeds the animals. So that it's a lovely symbiotic sustainable approach, not just because we want to be 100% eco-friendly, but also because it's
the geography.
It's right for the area.
No, absolutely. And I think it's interesting just from a Glengoyne perspective. It's something which we have been really, really aware of from Glengoyne, and ever since the Russells took over, really, and in the last sort of, every distillery should be the same. And it was interesting to see there was quite a lot of packaging, way more than just the packaging. The whole experience, the whole sort of setup is important. But I genuinely think that every brand should be looking at using recyclable materials these days, and from a packaging perspective, it just seems a very obvious thing to me. But
oh no, absolutely. I mean, we would have if we had thought we could have got away with it. We wouldn't even have had a gift carton for the single malt. And I hope that in months, in years to come, that the industry will start to work away from that.
Yeah, I think it would be great to get to a point that single malts don't need cartons. It would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
The carton that we actually did produce is, I think, probably the first to be made from basically loo roll. It's what they call 100%, I think, consumer waste or something it's called, and it's gained quite a lot of interest, shall we say, for the slightly distinct odour.
Right.
That comes off a carton. No, it's not what you think it is. It's just distinct.
I do know what you mean. Yeah, I do know what you mean for sure. Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I think that sort of for anybody. So I'll ask you this, and this is my sort of if for those people out there who may have many millions sitting around and I'm going to start a distillery. I decided I'm going to build a distillery, and the funny thing is in Scotland at the moment we hear of new ones every few weeks. Particularly one I've heard in the last couple of weeks in Stirling, Wolf Craig.
Yeah.
And before you know it, there'll be somebody else somewhere that's got a distillery that they want to do with various people. What's your top 5 tips for starting a distillery? Now, we're obviously doing the same, everybody, with sort of Rosebank at the moment. So for us, it's I'm sure it's the same. For everybody, there's certain things you've got to take into account. But what would be if you wanted to start a distillery, what are the 5 things that you think are the most important aspect of starting a distillery?
Wow. I suppose the easiest thing is just to, if you're in Scotland and you've got millions to spend on a distillery, just give it to someone else who's got one already. But
that's the easy way to do it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So look, I mean, it's very interesting you brought up Rosebank, because I'm a huge believer, as we all are, of these wonderful brands and the life that they can have, and the fact that you have become guardians of this incredibly important brand and distillery to be again. Yeah. Just like Diageo, with Brewer and Port Ellen Resurrection. This is the fundamental point. You do not build a distillery for Scotch whisky. Certainly, you do not build a distillery just to get it going and then walk away from it. It's a long-term goal. It's like planting an oak tree or something. You never expect to see it yourself, maturity. So the first thing is be in it for the long game.
Mm-hmm. It's a long game industry.
That's, I think, the most important thing. In terms of cash, if we're being a bit vulgar, whatever it's going to cost you to build it, assume that there's another 2/3. So if you've got 1/3 capital to build it, assume there's at least another 2/3 to mature enough stock before it's ready to sell. And even
Very
then,
top tip. Yeah. So
then it's going to take some time to pay down debt as well, probably.
So if it's gonna cost you 3 million, you need 10 million. There you go.
At least, yeah.
At least. Okay, because building the distilleries, you've got to then buy the grain, you've got to buy the people, you've got to buy the casks, and you've got to wait for the return.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just think about it. You know as well as I do. But one full lorry load of malted barley, depending on what it is, whether it's a special variety or bog standard or whatever, you're going to be looking in the region of what, £15,000, and we're a relatively small distillery. We basically get through. What do we get through? About a load a week, something like that. So that's just one very small aspect of running the distillery. And then you've got all your casks and everything else. And the other one you mentioned is team, and it's not the cost so much I would be concerned about there, because it's just a commercial item on the list, but it's the team itself. And if I was to look back to 2013, when we were pretty much getting there in terms of building it, the one thing that we probably didn't give enough time to, and it's taken us a good 6 years to get right, is the building of that team. If you're starting from scratch, especially in a remote location, team is the most important thing by far, and it's been the most rewarding. The position we're in now, having a 100% local team who are absolutely passionate about what they do and are doing a really, really good job. That is the most rewarding thing, I think, of anything of the distillery. That, and obviously producing the first single malt. So that would be number 3.
Team is important. Yeah.
Team is hugely important. 5. Let me think. 4 and 5. Well, look, if you're coming at it from where we're coming at it from, which is flavour, 4 is do not skimp. So do not skimp on yeast, on malted barley, on wood, on warehousing, all the aspects of making flavour, or giving the flavour every chance of succeeding. That should be back up at number 1, but it's certainly in the top 5. And then the 5th, let me think.
The 4 will do.
4 is probably enough, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing somebody said to me, which is a very, very valid point, and it is a problem, for example, on the island of Islay, is actually water supplies. And actually finding a location that you know that you have control over the water supply, or you own the water supply, or you work with because that is a major thing in Scotland these days in terms of landowners and that sort of relationship. And I don't know if you've obviously got a slightly unique position from Ardnamurchan's perspective, but that is a major point.
It's a commercial relationship we have, but it's a symbiotic one, so it's decent. But I would say that even on the West Coast, quantity of water is incredibly important in how you use it. We, for the last, every year of operation since 2014, really 2015, I suppose, we have basically had no rain between the months of end of April and beginning of June. It's a meteorological, cyclical, it just happens on the West Coast. And we've had to invest quite a lot of money in and a kind of recycling recovery system for our cooling water. So it doesn't just go straight through the condensers and out into the pond now. It's actually collected and recycled as much as possible. So we can actually run without any additional cooling water during the dry months.
No, it can get very dry out there, and I remember, I think it was it 4 or 5 years ago? I think it was in April time. I remember hearing that, I think it was, and you guys probably were suffering from it at that point as well, but I think Tobermory ran out of water. Tobermory whiskey, and they actually in April, and you're like, in April, and they hadn't rained in the West Coast for like 2 months of the whole
Yeah.
of February and March or something.
It happens every year,
Yeah.
absolutely without fail. We kind of joke about it, and someone just turns the tap off, and then we get worried, we get more worried, and then someone turns the tap back on again. And it's always exactly the same time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not just us. You said, you mentioned Tobermory on the Isle of Mull.
Yeah.
The Isle of Mull was actually, I think, certainly, if it wasn't last year, the year before, they banned visitors to the island during that time because there wasn't enough domestic water beyond what they required themselves.
There you go.
So it is quite severe.
And I've got some friends who are living out in Tiree at the moment, and they say you're amazed actually how dry it is out there. You actually get more rain sort of in the inland west coast, if you know what I mean. I.e., pretty much where I'm sitting at the moment,
Yes.
it's raining in Glasgow, more than the Western Isles. And Islay gets very dry as well. So, it is a problem for sure. But we'll see how things change. But yeah, look, thanks for the top 5. Alex, one more question before, or top 4. 5. One more question just before we wrap it up. I'm keen to, I ask everybody this. If you could say what was your whiskey moment, and maybe that's a drinking whiskey experience that you had with certain people, or something that you look back on the industry or your time in the industry and you go, that was a great occasion, that was a great event, that was a great time. It might be the opening of the, whatever it may be. Is there anything that you think that's what I really, particularly at the moment, we look back to, because we're all sort of locked in a little bit, we look back to things that we really sort of highlight in our times, and I just wonder if there's one thing that you look back on and go, that was a real whiskey moment for me.
Well, seeing as I only gave you 4 out of 5, am I allowed 2 for this?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are definitely allowed 2. Yeah.
And I'm literally plucking these out. They probably aren't, the absolute be all and end all, but they're 2 that have stuck in my mind quite vividly. One very positive, and one that I'm not saying it was negative, but it was a massive wake up call. So the positive one, if we may start with that, was an excellent dinner during the London Whisky Show last year. First day done, sore legs as usual kind of thing, sore feet, a couple of bottles of wine or 2 or more, with our great friends from Kilhoman. During the course of that dinner, we came up with the idea of blending a cask of Ardnamurchan and a cask of Kilhoman. Nice. And once we'd come up with that idea, there was another bottle of wine, and someone mentioned that the names of the 2 distilleries blended together actually came up with Kilhard. And then it just dawned on me that the surnames of myself and Anthony were Bruce and Wills. So it became known as Kilhard featuring Bruce Wills.
Love it.
That was one of those light bulb moments. It was a delicious whiskey as well. I hope there'll be more to come in the future.
And that's what happens when you socialise with other people in the whiskey industry, and it sort of sums up this industry. But that's brilliant. And the other one?
The other one, which was, as I say, a bit of a wake-up call and something I'll never forget, was having lunch just ahead of Dram Fest, which is one of my favourite whiskey shows in the world, in New Zealand in 2011, in the middle of an earthquake.
Christchurch.
So we're having lunch, and the whole building came down, and it was just one of those moments you never forget.
Was that the earthquake in Christchurch?
So it was the second big one, but it was the devastating one. Yeah. So I realised that was... we climbed out over the roof because they knew there would be a massive aftershock, and sure enough there was, and we were there in the middle of the street as all the famous buildings like the cathedral came down just a couple of blocks away. So look, it's all part of the great whiskey voyages. The everything we do from day to day. Especially, but they're an incredibly resilient city and country, and Dramfest continues. It's grown into the most amazing, even more amazing whiskey fair. and it was the last real whiskey fair that we ever attended before lockdown this year.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, I think Dave Broom was out, was he not? And
he was,
in New Zealand for a while.
He was there for about a month and a half afterwards,
I
unfortunately.
remember seeing him stuck in New Zealand. Yeah, there's quite a lot of people I know went out to that, and they all, just literally maybe managed to get back in time, but clearly Dave didn't. But yes, no, those whiskey fairs, it'd be nice to get back to them and see everybody properly. But yeah, Alex,
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, not at all. It's been great. And, for everybody out there, if you want to follow a great way to start a distillery, have a look at what Ardnamurchan done, and for example, your friends at Kilhoman, our friends at Kilhoman, in terms of two great distilleries who have started up in the last 10, 15 years. Kilhoman a little bit older, but great examples of how to do it correctly. So anybody with any millions out there, let us know.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I'm really looking forward to coming and visiting you at Rosebank.
Well, we are, that's going to be a big one for us, and we're still very much in the sort of initial phases of rebuilding that, but releasing some product and stuff, and it's all good. So yeah, we're excited, and as you are, and look forward to batch 2 of Ardnamurchan. Alex, thanks very much, and have a great, I hope lockdown finishes for us all soon. We can go and have a proper dram somewhere.
That would be good. I look forward to it. Many thanks, Gordon.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, Gordon, that was great. Really sit back and just enjoy the chat here. The whiskey business is it's a busy one to get into. It's a tough one. It is, and it's a long payoff.
It is, and one of the challenges is there's more and more brands. There's ultimately only so many variables, and I mean that in it's 3 ingredients. You distill it, you make it the same way. You use casks. There's only so many ways, in my view, that you can make whiskey, and I think so. I think one of the points is, what is your USP? You really need to think about, as Alex said, what do you want to create when you're at the very early part of the sort of the planning of a distillery, and stick to it. I think is really important.
Yes.
There we go.
I've just had a phone call from head office there, Gordon. Did we say Rosebank for the R's?
No, we didn't say Rosebank. Yeah, that's good point.
I think we're fired. I think that's...
Yeah, that's a good point. Rosebank, famous King of the Lowlands distillery, just released a 30-year-old, absolutely the finest whiskey anybody could drink.
We'll do a special. We'll do a Rosebank special in the new year. I think that's what let's just say that. Let's concentrate on the history, the whiskey, and all that, all the recreation. Great.
Now, what have you been drinking throughout all of this?
Gordon, I've hardly reached for a dram. It's been such a busy show. So I have got I've got the Smokehead Rum Rebel. And I'm just having a wee drink of that, just because you're talking about Isla there in Ardnaho, and I just fancy a wee bit of Isla. So
nice.
Wee bit of smoke.
Yeah, very nice. I have a Macallan in my glass, actually. I had a little bit of it left. I thought I'd just polish the bottle off. Macallan Gold.
Oh, nice.
Very nice. This was quite a controversial range for Macallan a few years ago, but Macallan Gold is very nice. Nice. Very drinkable. So yeah, just polishing that off, and the Bango's another episode.
And another episode, Gordon. And I was just about to say the Rum Rebel 46%, and we'll leave it for another time, but it's a rum cask, another R. And we can have to talk about finishing. I know we've touched on it before, but I'd like to make that a little... Must speak to Gordon about finishes and finishing, and that's a cracking... I'm going to have to say that rum. I love it. Right. Gordon, absolutely. On that note, well done.
Fantastic.
Well done. Thanks. On the 50s, I think we're honourable draw, and enjoy that whiskey. Another episode, episode 10 of Whisky Unscripted.
Fantastic.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.